that recording now, and we can sort of get started here. So just to sort of remind folks a little bit about us, Rob, if you wouldn't mind going to our slide here. Just a little bit about Little Sis. So Rob and I and Molly, who's usually leading these calls, we work for an organization, a power research nonprofit called the Public Accountability Initiative. And we do a lot of producing our own reports and doing our own research. But one of our projects that we're most excited about is actually our database, our power research database and mapping tool, Little Sis. If you haven't heard of Little Sis before, the name is supposed to be like the opposite of Big Brother. So if we're thinking about, folks in power, sort of like looking down, watching down on us, Little Sis is supposed to be the opposite of that. So a group of activists and organizers and researchers watching back to hold the powers that be accountable. So that's where the name Little Sis comes from. If you could, feel free to visit littlesis.org. You can peruse the database and use it as like a research database. It's also a wiki-style research tool and platform. So you're able to actually contribute data to this platform, tracking ties between powerful people and institutions. And so just a little bit about the Map the Power series that we're all here with tonight. So sometime back after the election, we were realizing there's a real sort of need for additional research capacity in movement work, in organizing work, and we were trying to come up with a way to sort of supply a lot of research trainings and resources in a way that could actually make an impact for folks who are doing organizing and activism on the ground. And so we've come up with this Map the Power project, which has a few pieces. We do these sort of monthly research tool webinars to help folks sort of develop like a research skill base that they can then apply to different projects that come up. If you've been on these calls before, we have a bunch of different projects kind of in the works that you can sort of pitch in on and sort of build up just general research capacity that way. And we also are focused on building up what we call research pods. So sort of like independent groups of folks who are based in like a particular city or region who want to really focus in on doing research on power structures and power networks where they live. And so we work with folks who are interested in sort of getting these things together. So we have pictures here on your screen. The top one is from a research group in Columbus, Ohio. The bottom one is for a research training for the research group in Philadelphia. So we work with folks to, like within their research pods, develop particular trainings and skills to sort of build out capacity so that they can like have a research impact where they live. And so at the end of this call, actually, we'll have an opportunity if you're interested in either hosting a training with us or like sort of kicking off the idea of starting a research pod where you live, you'll have the opportunity to let us know so we can get in touch with you. And so that is sort of the very quick review. I think I recognize most folks' names on here from working these webinars before. So thank you all for returning and joining us again. And like I said, feel free to sort of connect and chat in our chat box here as we get going. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce everyone to Rob Galbraith, who's a researcher here with me in Buffalo at Little Sis, and he's going to be walking us through sort of the ins and outs of the public request process.
All right, thanks, Jen. As Jen mentioned, my name's Rob Galbraith. I'm a senior research analyst at PAI in Little Sis. I've been with the organization for, about 6 years now, and for the past 6 years, part of my work has been filing various public records requests. Both in New York State where we're based and in other states. I've filed requests in California, in Texas, in Ohio, and I filed some national requests with federal government agencies as well. So through, just a few things that I've sort of learned in my experience filing these requests and talking with other FOI requesters. FOI is freedom of information. It can be kind of a clunky phrase, so I'll use FOI, public records, public information, sort of interchangeably in this presentation. But I'm going to go over, trying to talk about, what kinds of records that we can get through FOI requests. We'll talk about how to draft a request to, improve our chances of getting a useful response and getting a response quickly. And part of that is going to be actually going line by line almost through kind of a standard request from New York State, which is where I'm the most familiar with filing requests. I'm going to show a couple of case studies of, I think, interesting projects that people have done with public records, that have resulted in, some good outcomes and just interesting applications of these public requests. We're going to explore Muckrock as a tool for filing and managing requests. That's an online platform, sort of like Little Sis, that sort of creates a community of public records requesters all filing requests and sharing them and, sharing information about how to do it. And generally, the aim of this webinar is going to be discussing strategies for using these requests to expose. Being said, you don't have to have a focus on corporate power with this. FOI laws are a really powerful tool for anyone doing any sort of government accountability work. You can find a lot of really useful information for lots of different kinds of campaigns for, economic, social, and environmental justice. So first of all, what are public records? And largely, they're pretty much anything created by a government agency, whether it's, an executive like a governor or a county executive or a mayor's office, or your various sorts of agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency or the departments of financial services, including public schools and universities, state universities, economic development agencies. And so the scope of what are considered public records is really broad. You can find contracts, you can find reports that different agencies have created studying a certain topic. You can find minutes of meetings of various boards and panels. Financial disclosure forms is a really kind of useful for public records requests in lots of places. When someone is appointed to a government body, whether it's an economic development agency or some sort of board to a non-elected position, they have to submit a financial disclosure form disclosing their assets and companies they're invested in, secondary homes they own, etc. You can get letters and emails, communication, between government officials and, going from government officials to outsiders. You can find visitor logs for when people are paying visits to, when people come in and, visit, like the White House, for example. The Trump administration is currently subject to a lawsuit over that. But also people, going in to talk to environmental regulators, for example, lobbyists, etc. There are some exceptions to that, though, and it's really important to note that these exceptions to public records laws vary greatly, state by state, and from states to the federal government. But, sort of by and large, personally identifying information about officials is going to be exempted. information related to police investigations, unless you're talking about something that is long past, are going to be exempted. Communications within or between agencies. And so when you're talking about, a government agency's kind of like internal deliberations before, making some final decision, those a lot of the times will be exempted. Trade secrets are exempt from disclosure. That is, if a private company has submitted information to a government agency and thus creating a public record, information that could harm that company commercially will largely be accepted. And by and large, legislatures, both Congress and state legislatures, are generally not covered by freedom of information laws. So, what can we do with records? What are some situations we might find ourselves in where we want to make records requests? One thing that at PAI we have a big focus on is finding conflicts of interest. Public records requests can be really great for that. You can find, emails and communications uncovering cozy relationships between government officials and the corporate world or lobbyists. You can find a lot of times, government agencies will contract with private contractors, consulting firms and such, to, especially when you're talking about environmental impact studies, for example. A lot of times those contractors also do work for the regulated industries. And so, you can find conflicts of interest there. You can just, learn in greater detail, what goes into the creation of government programs. You can find, how governments are spending money. You can find, regulatory reviews that are created by the government, but generally not published or disseminated widely. You can also a lot of times get board meeting minutes where those will not only have, what was deliberated in the meeting, but they'll also have, packets of information about, specific board resolutions that, may have been considered, or even, attendance records of who actually came to the meetings. A lot of times when government boards meet, you'll have people, from the outside attending these attending these meetings rather. And, you can find out, who was there, what happened at these meetings. You can also find the details of public contracts. That's not only, how much was a contract for, but, by obtaining contracts and reading them carefully, you can find, are there, weird, terms, for example. Just, off the top of my head, I'm thinking of, I made a request for the contract between the University of Buffalo, our local public university here, or a local public university, and the agency representing Hillary Clinton when she came to speak at UB. And, just by making that request, we were able to learn that, not only was she paid $275,000 for the speech, but she also had requests like the school had to provide a really high-tech teleprompter for her and had to provide transcription services to generate a transcript of the speech at the school's expense. So yeah, I mean, there's really a lot of stuff that you can use it for. It's a broad and powerful tool that, with a little creativity, can provide a lot of useful information for our campaigns. So now I'm going to start kind of drilling down into what are some things to keep in mind, when you're putting a request together. The first of these is that you want to be extremely specific in how you phrase your request. That means doing a lot of research ahead of time so you can know exactly what you're asking for. You want to know, in particular, what kind of jargon do agencies use when they're talking about the records? What are their exact names for the different kinds of records they have? And just in general, the more narrowly tailored your request, the more likely you're going to be to receive a response that's A, useful to you, and B, comes to you in a reasonable time frame. You don't want to ask for all the records containing the information that you want, from the beginning of time. Part of the specificity is that you want to focus your request on a really specific period of time. Say I want everything from 2002 or 2012 through 2017, for example. Just a best practice is to focus your requests on a time frame, and the smaller the time frame you can nail down, the better. But you also don't want to shoot yourself in the foot, because these do take a long time. You don't want to narrow it down too much that you might exclude something useful. But when you're making a request, just make sure that you always focus on a specific period of time that you're asking for the records for. When you're asking for records related to corporations that you're researching, for example, and say you want to find communications between that company and a government official or a government agency, don't just ask for records related to that company. Do some research to know who are the government affairs officials at that company, who are their lobbyists, or who are their attorneys. And so, ask not just for records related to the companies, but ask for communications with specific people. I think that's all I've got for specificity. But the second tip is be thorough. Ask. Don't go overboard where you create a request that's extremely onerous for an agency. But also don't just ask for letters, for example. Ask for letters or emails or all other written or electronic correspondence. Especially if you're dealing with an agency that is going to be wanting to withhold information from you, you need to make sure that your request asks for every type of record that could contain the information that you want. So for communications, you're also going to want to ask for email attachments and emails where the person that you're interested in has been CC'd. Also, one thing I like to do is to ask for records and portions of records. That way, if there's something that is exempt in like the full record, if you ask for portions of records that contain the information that you want, you can just get the cutout. You can you have a reason to say, if you have to contest it later on, that you've asked for the parts that may have been cut out or that aren't exempted that still contain the information that you want. You want to ask for records, not information, and this is a really important one. Don't think by and large, don't think of filing a FOI request like you're just posing a question to an agency, because a lot of times your records access officer isn't really going to know what to do with that. So this kind of gets back to the specificity thing again. But you want to do your research ahead of time and know the names of the documents you're looking for. I want the personal financial disclosure form for person X. Ask for communications, or ask for contracts or memoranda of understanding. Don't just ask for I want the information about, corporation Y, for example. The less it looks like you're just kind of on a fishing expedition looking for dirt, the more likely you are to get a useful and timely response to your request. Another one is mark deadlines on your calendar, and the different deadlines that exist vary from state to state and government agency government unit to government unit. But do some research by looking at your individual FOI statute. Every state has one. So does the federal government. That's FOIA. That's, probably the most commonly known one. Sometimes it's called the Public Information Law or the Sunshine Law or the Right to Know Law. But look at the law beforehand, find out what the deadlines are, mark them on a calendar, and hold the agencies to them. For example, in New York State, once you submit a request, the state or the agency has 5 days to send you some sort of acknowledgement of that request and to give you a general time frame for when they're going to provide the records. After that first 5 days in New York, they have 20 business days to respond to your request. And so you want to make sure exactly 20 business days later, if you're not holding the records, that you can, email your records access officer or call them and, just say, oh, hey, I just want to follow up on this request. This kind of feeds right into the next one. And that's that you want to always be nice to your records access officers. Not only are records access officers generally overworked bureaucrats, but, they're people and they deserve to be treated kindly and with respect, even if, you may be frustrated that, you feel like they're holding out on you or they're jerking you around, which, a lot of times they are. But, not only are they, people that deserve kindness and respect, they also have a lot of leeway when it comes to dealing with your request to, find reasons to possibly delay your request or deny it or, bump it down on the pile. Courts have given government agencies lots of leeway as far as just saying like, oh, we need more time to look for the responsive documents. So we're going to need another, 6 months. The nicer and more respectful you are to the folks that you're dealing with, the less likely they are going to be to want to just bump your request down the line. And the last kind of general tip I have is that, filing a formal request isn't always necessary to get public documents. This is especially true when you're dealing with local governments or, folks maybe in state or federal government that you might have a relationship with. You could just start by kind of giving them a call or sending an email and asking informally for the records. A lot of times that sort of informal request will be, read more charitably than if somebody just gets a letter in the mail or an email with a lot of legalistic language pointing to statutes and giving deadlines and stuff, which, that can be read as antagonistic. And so, just by sending an email or making a phone call first, and again, especially with local governments where the records access officer is probably somebody that does a lot of other things at that government agency, you might be able to get the records a lot quicker than, by sending them a letter with this legal language. But also, that only goes so far. And often you'll probably find that, if you just make an informal request, the person will either direct you to a form to make a formal request, or they'll just treat your informal request like it's a formal one. In that case, if they say, we've received your FOI request and we will respond within X amount of time, make sure you follow up with them and with, some very specific language about what you want, with the time frame, with the names of the documents and everything else. That way, you'll kind of have a paper trail to point to should you need to appeal or, hopefully not sue over it, but that is something that folks often have to do. So now I'm going to kind of walk you through a New York FOI request. The tips from this are generally like applicable at anywhere. I took a lot of this language just from the boilerplate language I use in the FOI requests I make, every week. So first, what you want to do is, I guess before I didn't put this on the slide, but very, very first, what you want to do is, address the records access officer. Hopefully you have their name, and so you can say, "Dear Mr. or Ms. XYZ." Then you want to be sure to point to the statute. So here, I've named the New York Freedom of Information Law and said what article it is in and what section of of the state code. And you say, I hereby request a copy of all records or portions thereof. That again gets back to your thoroughness, related to or referring to the following. That or referring to, depending what you're asking for, you might want to take it out, because that might be read as being overbroad. But it's kind of up to your discretion. So the next thing you want to do is describe the records. And like I said, you want to be very specific. And so I have a few examples here for communications, any written or electronic communications, and then you have your time frame again, sent or received by, and that's the sent or received is really important. You want to capture everything that a person you're interested in has to say. Then we have again, a contract. I don't have a time frame here, but remember, always put a time frame in, or meeting minutes, board resolutions, or other board meeting materials. Feel free to take this language exactly. Those are kind of three broad categories of stuff you might be looking for. Next, you want to make sure you ask for a fee waiver. Always ask for a fee waiver, because if you don't, they'll probably charge you fees, and those can add up really quickly. You point to reasons why it's a good idea for them to give you a fee waiver. They usually will do it. Say it's a matter of public concern, you're not making the request for commercial use. Then when you ask for a fee waiver, make sure you say that, if they deny it, ask them to let you know what the charges are before they fulfill your request. Otherwise, they can hit you with a massive bill. I remember one time I asked for information from the Erie County Department of Social Services about the heating assistance program, and they told me that fulfilling their request would cost $36,000. You don't want them to send you the documents and then send you a bill for $36,000 before before you can kind of assent to that. You want to say how you want to receive the records. I like getting things electronically. You can ask for them in hard copy if you want to. If you ask for them in hard copy, make note that you are more likely to have to pay a fee for those. I'm gonna burn through the rest of these tips real fast. Then we can take a Q&A right after that. So give me maybe like 3 more minutes to get through the last 3 of these, and then we'll take some questions. You want to remind the agency of the time they have to respond. That's just good practice. Then it's something that you can point to when you follow up if you don't hear back from them. You want to ask them to redact the records or release partial ones. And that means, if they find something, but, maybe there's something there that they, that is exempt from disclosure. If you, put this in there, that lets them know that you're okay with them just redacting the exempted material and giving you whatever is, disclosable. And then again, say thank you at the end. You want to, treat your records access officers, with kindness and respect. So yeah, we can take a little break here and take some questions if we've got some.
Sure, great. Thanks, Rob. That's awesome. It's always good to see. And like Rob said, feel free to just use this language as he has it drafted in this training. It's been used before to success, so this covers a lot of bases here and can cut down on your time as you're drafting your first requests. A couple of different personal issues getting FOIA requests. We have one question that asked, are requests for proposals, so RFPs, are those FOIable? Because I think it was Leslie that said that they've been told that they were not FOIable by a local agency.
I guess the answer to that one is it depends. And that is kind of a shortcoming of trying to do a presentation like this, for everybody everywhere, because it's very much, it's very much depends on what your state statute is. At the very end of this presentation, I have a slide of some more research. Is the Reporters Association for Freedom of the Press or something like that. I don't remember the exact name of the organization, but they have really great state by state information that you can find there. I have successfully been able to FOIA RFPs in New York State. I'll say.
Okay.
Oh, and also, if you get rejected, just always appeal it. And the next slide after this is I'm going to talk about what to do when you get rejected.
Okay, great. Yeah. A question of our time: what to do when we face rejection. So another question, just sort of about this sort of nitty gritty, also from Leslie. If you don't specifically ask for, say, email attachments, if you're not asking for a very specific piece of communication, are you saying that they potentially just won't include them in your request?
Yeah, pretty much. The thing is that, a lot of times, your records access officers aren't going not just a lot of times, all the time. They're not going to know what you're looking for as well as you know what you're looking for, except in like some very very special circumstances when there's some like hot document in like the secret filing cabinet. So yeah, a lot of times if you don't say, I want the email attachments, it just won't even occur to them to send them to you. And so that is why thoroughness is so important when you're drafting a request, because it's possible that there is some records access officer that is maliciously reading every request as uncharitably as possible and looking for reasons to withhold information. But a lot of times it's just a matter of the folks that are going after your records just don't know what you're looking for as well as you do. And so kind of by employing some of these best practices, you can you put it in their head to actually include those things.
Great. And then just one last one real quick, and then we'll let you get back to the case examples and actually showing us how to put one of these things together. Marcy was saying that they're not clear on the exception for communications within and between agencies. So would that exception apply to state and local education boards or states' education officials and local mayors?
I'm afraid that's just kind of another it depends one. And a lot of times what it depends on is the individual person responding to your request. I know in New York State I've seen that exemption applied very vigorously when asking for communications, for example, between the state university system and individual campuses. They say these are it's generally referred to as the interagency or intra-agency exemption. And I don't know the extent to which this exemption exists in other states. I'm assuming, that it does. Your best case scenario is to don't worry about if a record or not your best case scenario, but your best move, your strategically anyways, is to even if you're aware that there's some exemption on the books, ask for the records anyways, because a lot of times, your records access officer is not going to read it as, under like the exact, like strictest reading possible. And you may just get the stuff. And if they reject you, you can always file an appeal, which I'm going to use that as a segue to talk about what to do when you get rejected.
Great, thanks.
And there's a couple different ways that you can get rejected. The first, probably more aggravating one, is they just ignore your request. And in my experience, law enforcement agencies love this one. This is why it's super important to make your follow-up emails and phone calls, holding them to their, holding them to their deadlines. If you've been ignored, and I know at least in New York State, there's not, there isn't like a hard and fast rule for how long, being ignored can slide. I tend to give them like another, whatever the amount of time they have to acknowledge your request. I'm inclined to, usually give that to them again. So in New York, it's 5 business days. If I haven't even gotten an acknowledgement in 10 business days, I'm going to follow up. And if I don't get a response to my follow-up communication within a day, then I immediately file an appeal to whoever their appeals officer is. And they have to have that information publicly available, who their appeals officer is. If your appeal is ignored, then what you do is you send another communication and you threaten to sue them. And hopefully that gets you at least an acknowledgement, gets the ball rolling on your request. If they continue to ignore you, then you have to sue them, which is especially for, social justice organizations, activists, freelance journalists, that is prohibitively expensive. And that is, unfortunately, just kind of a cost-benefit move that that agencies can make sometimes. Is are we going to count on a person not having the resources to sue us, and we can just ignore this request and make it go away? Usually, though, if you threaten to sue them, they'll at least respond to your request or give you a rejection. If your request is just rejected flat out, and I have an example of a rejection notice that I received from the governor's office in California. You can see they're pointing to a specific exemption. You can file an appeal. And there's usually, depending on the size of an agency, there's usually, they'll have like a FOIA appeals officer who, they're an attorney that works for them, and their job is to, consider appeals. And it could be a whole other long webinar on how to draft an appeal. A general tip for when you're writing an appeal, though, is that you want to be describe exactly the situation, in as great detail as you possibly can, and say why, say what exemption they cited, say how long it was that they ignored your request, and then tell the appeals officer why that's wrong, that they rejected it, or why that exemption does not apply. Why they delayed your request for an unreasonable amount of time, or why the amount of time that they delayed your request was unreasonable, I'll say. And then you hope for the best, I guess, with appeals. And one more thing with the appeals is that it's important to note that appealing a rejection and losing doesn't matter at all. You're in no worse position if you file an appeal and are rejected. I have filed, dozens of appeals, and usually I get at least something for them. So always file an appeal. You have literally nothing to lose by filing an appeal. So always do that. If your appeal is rejected, you can sue them. I have actually I've never personally done it. I'm sort of involved in one FOI lawsuit right now, but regarding a request that some activists that I have worked with have made of a public body. But yeah, unless you have a lot of resources to bear, a lawsuit can unfortunately be prohibitively expensive. But I want to stress that kind of fear of being put in a position where you have to sue, don't worry about that at all. File FOIA requests, file them copiously, appeal them copiously, because 9 times out of 10 you're going to get something. So yeah, I'm going to go into a couple kind of interesting case studies, I think, of how people use public information requests. And one of my favorite FOI requesters is a reporter who writes at a Desmog blog, Itai Vardi, who has done really great work uncovering conflicts of interest regarding oil and gas pipelines, all over the United States. And what he does is he reads environmental reviews. He finds out who the contractors are on these things. He files requests to FERC, to different departments of environmental protection, to get copies of environmental reviews of proposed pipelines and stuff, and he combs through those fastidiously, and he researches all the names on those, and he has really uncovered some really really interesting and kind of explosive stuff. And this here is just a sample of like 4 of his headlines, from the past 4 months, from reporting that he's done using FOI requests. Sorry, we're sort of running out of time here. I do want to get to showing you guys Muckrock, which is a great resource for filing requests. Really briefly, Open Oversight is a project out of Chicago where they found that folks were having a really hard time getting their complaints against police officers recognized. And so they used a public records request to get the roster of the entire Chicago Police Department, because they found that if people who want to make a complaint against an officer, you have to have, a name and their badge number in order to make a complaint. So you have people that, could pick an officer out of a lineup to make their complaint, but because they don't know their name or their badge number, their complaints were just thrown in the trash. So what they got the entire, and then they combed through police department Flickr accounts and other kind of public data for photos of officers that had their names or part of their names and their badge numbers listed. And they made a website where those are correlated to this roster that they got through a public records request. And so now people that want to make a complaint against a police officer can go to the Open Oversight website, put in demographic information about the officer. It was a white male of such and such height or whatever, and it will provide an actual photo array of police officers, where if they pick the person out, they will have their name and badge number in order to make a complaint. I think that was a really cool and creative use of these public records laws. So Muckrock is a tool, a lot in the same spirit of Little Sis, in that it draws on a community of researchers who are making FOI requests, and this will actually help you with a lot of that language that I went through in my tips for drafting a request. And it will help you draft your requests. It will help you manage them and follow up on them, and it will publish the results. And they actually, even if you get paper responses from an agency, they digitize them and make them available online. So not only can you have like an electronic copy of the results of your request, but anyone else can go to their website and see the information that you requested and that you got. And that's a really great way. You can use that website to sort of draw inspiration for your own requests based on what people have asked, of other states and of the federal government. It automatically follows up on them. It has a way for you to crowdfund fees if you get hit with, a massive a fee for your requests. You can crowdfund payment for that, and it has an automatic way to appeal requests as well. That being said, it does cost money. I think it's about $5 per request, which I realize isn't cheap, but it is like a really great resource. I'm looking. Oh, we got 10 minutes left, so cool. I am going to exit the slideshow now and just go through a really quick demo of how to make a request with Muckrock, and then I can take some more questions. So I'm going to the Muckrock site here, and you can see this is what it looks like when you are logged in on Muckrock. You have a file a request button right in the middle there. I'm already logged into my account, so this isn't like the landing page, but I wanted to kind of streamline it a little bit. You add a subject, so I'm just going to say UB emails, and then you write your description of what you're looking for. So I want to say electronic communications to and from the Buffalo Bills, our local football team. You indicate whether it's from a local, state, or federal agency. I'm going to click state here. You type in your state name, New York, and then you search agencies. And so I'm going to say University at Buffalo. Oh. That's not right. State University of New York at Buffalo. There we go. Sometimes you have to type it in a couple different ways to get it. You click submit there, and it takes you to a draft of your request. Now, their sort of boilerplate language isn't as precise as I like it, and so I like to substitute in the stuff you guys saw during the slideshow, but you can see it just took that little thing that I said I wanted right here, and it put it into a request. It cites the statute. It says it's not for commercial purposes, makes a fee waiver request, and it's got a thank you there. And then you just click submit. I'm not going to do that because I don't really care about emails from UB to the Buffalo Bills. But if you do that, then it will submit it. And you can go here. It'll save it as a draft. You can also embargo it if you want to keep your request private. I'm going to cut off this demo here. I definitely encourage you all to explore Muckrock, though. It's a really, really great resource. If you have the money to do it, I strongly encourage you to do it. That being said, they have a great Q&A forum where you don't have to be spending money with them to ask questions. You can pose questions there, and there are a lot of really knowledgeable folks that use this forum that can help you with your questions, including some really prolific and talented journalists and activists. So I'm gonna open it back up for questions again, and then we can do a poll really quick.
Great, thanks Rob for rolling through all of that stuff with us. As you can see, Rob has put some other resources up on the screen now where you can learn a little bit more about these important requests and this important tool. One thing that has been coming up, we haven't had any real specific questions since our last Q&A, but a lot of folks are wondering if they can get a copy of Rob's slideshow and a recording. We are recording this and we'll have it up on our YouTube channel for the Public Accountability Initiative. We'll also send out a PDF of this slideshow so folks can sort of grab that language like we were talking about. So when you're filing your own requests, you can get to that easily.
Can I jump in real quick, Jen?
Sure, go ahead.
I also just want to say that if anyone wants to borrow any language from any of my FOI requests, you can actually look up my user profile on Muckrock. That's what I use to manage all of my requests. All of my requests on there are public, and I've made them to a lot of different places. And you can even filter them by only the successful ones, for example, and borrow any language at all from those.
Rob, do you think you could pull that up on the screen real quick and just show folks your
Yeah,
profile?
absolutely.
Great.
So so you can see here, this has my latest requests, my recently completed ones. I don't know if this is what it looks like but for everyone, but my username on Muckrock is Galbraith. Robert Galbraith is my name. I think if you just type that into the search bar, it'll come up. Maybe not. Yeah, I suppose not. But I can. Yeah, I mean, I think if you go, maybe it's /user. Nope. There is a way to search for me on this website. I'm sorry, I don't know exactly what it is, but my username on there is Galbraith. You can also just shoot me an email at rob@littlesis.org. If anyone wants to get a link to all of my FOIA requests, shoot me an email and I will make sure I get it to you.
Great. Great. So we'll be sending out all of those resources to everyone who jumped on the call tonight. We just kind of want to wrap up here. We have a couple of minutes left. And like I said before, we wanted to start up a poll here to have a few questions about research opportunities and to see if folks are interested in hosting trainings. So I'm actually going to launch that poll now. So you should see a poll showing up here now, and you should be able to just select yes or no thanks. And the question is, are you interested in hosting a power research workshop where you live? And so we could do this a few different ways. We could do where you're hosting something webinar style and we're involved, or you're doing it just sort of on your own using some of the knowledge and you just get some resources from us and we can help you get that all set up. So again, if you're interested in hosting a power research workshop where you live, you can go ahead and vote now, and we'll wait just a few more seconds here to give folks an opportunity to vote. All right, that looks good. Okay, we'll do our next question here. This is a favorite one. So what should our next webinar cover? So the reason that we chose to do FOIA is because there's a high demand to learn about these public requests. And so the options are researching nonprofit organizations. So think foundations, think tanks, so information on how to do that. Little Sis 201, and so this is for folks who have been through a Little Sis training before but want to learn how to do bulk uploads, so loading lots of data all at once, or using our data visualization tool to make those cool network maps that you can see on our website, and how to make lists, or to conduct a regional power analysis. So kind of getting into more the nitty-gritty of how to actually put together a full power analysis of a particular area or group of people. So give folks, that's kind of a long one, so give folks a little extra time on this one to vote. So again, it's what should our next webinar cover, and the options are researching nonprofit organizations, Little Sis 201, so sort of like some advanced tools, and conducting a regional power analysis. And of course, these are all things that we will eventually cover in the future. We're just trying to figure out like which one to do on our next webinar. Cool. Great. I'm going to launch our last one here. And our last question, are you interested in joining our National Rapid Response Research Team? So this is just a simple yes, no. If you're interested at all, just go ahead and click yes, get some information. We can always remove you. If you've been on these calls before, you've probably seen occasionally we have different sort of national level research projects come up. We're looking for folks who sort of have been building skills with us to kind of jump in there and help build those out. There's one that's been sort of ongoing, mapping folks who are involved in pushing Islamophobia, what we call the Islamophobia industry. So there are a bunch of folks who have been jumping on the Map the Training webinars, have been involved in that. And so, you know, as these projects are growing, we'd love to develop a team of folks who have been on these trainings who can then be called upon to sort of pitch in whenever these projects come up. So this would be, do you want to join our National Rapid Response Research Team? Great. Okay. And so that's it for us tonight. We've hit exactly 9 o'clock. Thank you everybody for joining us. And of course, you know, if you are interested, I see someone saying that if there had been a maybe option on the training, you know, if you're even remotely interested and just want to get a little more information about what that would entail, please reach out to us. We'd love to sort of figure out what would work for you and see how we can work together. But again, thanks for joining Rob and I tonight. Really appreciate everyone getting on here, and you can look for all of these resources to be available for us throughout the end of the week.
All right. Thanks, everybody.